everyone, welcome back to From the Bookshelf for another book club video. We are once again looking at City of Bones, where we will be looking at chapters 11 and 12 today. Before we get started, go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe to this channel just so you can get notified for videos when they come out and to see all the new things that we got going on the channel. So let's get started. Chapter 11, Magnus Bane. So we're going to start on page 190 for those following along. Here we have Jace telling Clary who Magnus Bane must be. So he says he's a warlock. Only a warlock could have put a block in your mind like that. Then Clary goes on, is he a warlock you've heard of? Demanded Clary, who was rapidly tiring of Jace's reasonable voice. The name does sound familiar. So my thought here is they're talking about Magnus. He's saying he must be a warlock because this is kind of like something that a warlock could do. But he's not really sure. The name sounds familiar, but he doesn't really know. So Maris and Robert Lightwood, who are Alec and Isabel's parents, run the Institute. And they work with warlocks occasionally when they need things done. And supposedly, if you read later on in the series, Magnus Bane is the one they work with a lot. So they know who he is. So it's kind of weird that the kids don't know who he is. Like, right off the bat. Like, he supposedly works with them there at the Institute every now and again. So it seems to reason that they should know his name and that he's a warlock. Just a thought, because it seems a little strange that it's like, oh, he must be a warlock. I don't know, though. But you should know, because your parents most likely hire him. But let's move on to page 192. In this passage, Clary is describing Jace and Alec. She says she was looking at Alec instead, watching him as he talked to Jace. There was a kinetic, almost feverish energy to him that hadn't been there before. Something about Jace sharpened him, brought him into focus. If she were going to draw them, she thought she would make Jace a little blurry while Alec stood out, a sharp, clear planes and angles. I find it interesting that as Clary is describing the two of them together, that Alec is the one that's the main, is like main. He's in focus, as she said, if she were to draw him. Jace would be blurry, Alec would be in focus. It's almost like the two of them together, like Jace kind of like is in the background, yet Jace always seems to be the one that's always in the middle of everything that Alec is trying to, catch up with and be like and stuff. So it's interesting that when she's looking at them, she sees Alec as something like a little bit more than Jace is in a sense because of the way she describes it here. And I find that really cool that you see that while Jace might be like the more better shadow hunter in a sense, like everybody thinks he's this amazing shadow hunter, he's so great, but then when Claire's looking at them, she sees Alec as the one that's in focus, the one that's more present, and I find that really interesting to see. So let's move on to page 195. So in this scene, we are in a cafe run by Downworlders, and Jace is flirting with the waitress because, that's what Jace does. He kind of like flirts. So Alec, in his jealous way, says, "You don't think he means it, that he likes her, I mean." Isabel shrugged. "She's a Downworlder," she said, as if that explained everything. "I don't get it," Clary said. I don't really get it either. Like, I understand where Alec's coming from. He's jealous of Jace's affections towards other people, which I think is one of the reasons he doesn't really like Clary all that much at first, because, Jace is paying all this attention to her. But I don't get what Isabel means here. She's saying just because, Keeley Keeley's a Seelie, that means she automatically has to be liked, that every Downworlder has to be immediately like, what? I don't really know. And that's the thing, is like, I don't get what she's saying. Like, she's a Downworlder. So what? Like, that doesn't automatically mean you have to be attracted to them. It doesn't mean you have to automatically be not attracted to them. It's like, if you like someone, you like someone. Why does whether they're a shadow hunter or a downworldler matter? I just don't understand what she's trying to say. If you do, go ahead and leave the comment down below. Let me know what you think she might mean. But let's move on from that. So the next two are going to be both on page 201. So in this scene, Hodge is talking about a picture of old members of the circle, where he's talking about the Lightwoods, the Waylands, and all of that. So let me read that description real quick for you. Hodge indicated an elegant-looking teenage couple, both dark-haired, the girl half a head taller than the boy. Her features were narrow and predatory, almost cruel. The Lightwoods, he said. And there, he indicated a very handsome boy with curling dark hair, high color in his square-jawed face, is Michael Wayland. He doesn't look anything like Jace. He resembles his mother. So I find this interesting. So there's two different things, as I said. So the first one, if you've read The Infernal Devices, which is the prequel series, you'll see that there's this description of the Lightwoods with, you know, tall, dark hair, blue eyes. And if you've read The Infernal Devices, you know that this family that they're describing here in this is not necessarily the Lightwoods. Because the Lightwoods back in that series looked a lot different, and a different Shadowhunter family had this description. So I won't spoil that too much, but if you know, I feel like you'd know. And I find it interesting that he's hitting those traits as like Lightwood traits, when originally they kind of weren't. And then the second part was the second half of that, where Clary says he doesn't look like Michael Wayland, and Hodge says that he looks like his mother. However, you know, since Hodge knows about Jace's true parentage, he knows this isn't true. So it's interesting here that he puts that in there because, well, he does look like one of his parents, who, while not mentioned in the description, is in the photo that they're looking at. So it's like, if you're looking at it, I don't know, like, I feel like maybe you'd be able to see the resemblance, like the real resemblance, because when we get later on, we find out who his father really is, we see that there's that resemblance there between the two of them, but I won't spoil that for now. However, it's makes me wonder if this is Hodge just trying to hide the secret, because we know that Hodge does know it. So is he hiding this, or is he truly saying that he thinks he looks like his mother, like his actual biological mother? Because as we know, he gets his traits from his father's side of the family. So let's move on to page 203. So in this, we're talking about the photo from the photo of the circle again. It says, a flicker of hesitation passed over Hodge's face. I prefer you not show it to Jace, he said. He has enough to contend with without photos of his dead father turning up. After Clary is asking if she can keep the photo. And this is interesting because he's saying, we don't really want to worry Jace with photos of his dead father, but it's not so much that, as he just told Clary who everyone in the photo was, right? So if Jace saw this photo, who is he going to point the finger at as his father? Is he going to point at Michael Wayland? Is he going to point at someone else? That's the real question. So here, it's a wonder, is he caring about Jace's feelings? Or is he actually caring about something coming out that he doesn't want to come out? I think it's the latter. So let's move on to page 207. So in this scene, Clary is asleep, and Isabel's in the room, coming to get her so they can get ready for the party to go see Magnus Bane. So Clary wakes up, and she sat up quickly, and her head struck something hard. Ow, you hit me in the head. It was a girl's voice, Isabel. She flicked on the light next to the bed and regarded Clary resentfully, rubbing at her scalp. So Clary's sleeping, and Isabel's literally hovering over her, like probably inches from her face. And you startle her awake. she's gonna sit up, she's gonna jerk up, you're gonna get hit. Like, that seems like common sense. But she's like upset, like, why would Clary hit me in the head? It's like, well, you were in her face. She didn't know you were there. And she woke up and headbutted you because you were too close to her. Like, why would you wake somebody up when you're like this close to them? That just seems illogical. And I don't really understand why Isabel does it. It just seems weird that she'd be that close to her. It's like she wants to get hit. I don't know. Obviously, she doesn't want to get hit. But it just seems weird that she would put herself in a situation where she would be. But anyway, I just thought that was strange. So let's move on to 211. Page 211. So, in this, we have Clary bringing up the fact that she thinks Alec is gay. And, of course, Isabel knows. And so, because Clary sees that Alec is in love with Jace, but Jace doesn't realize it. And so, Clary says, I guess I didn't realize it was such a big deal, after Isabel says nobody can know about it. And so Isabel says, it would be to my parents. They would disown him and throw him out of the clave. What, you can't be gay and a shadow hunter? There's no official rule about it, but people don't like it. I mean, less with people our age, I think. So I feel like she's saying two conflicting things here. Like, she's contradicting herself within, like, 2 sentences. First, she says that her parents would disown him and then he'd be thrown out of the clave. Being thrown out of the clave means, like, being banished by shadow hunters. Like, no longer being a shadow hunter, which is, like, official thing, like, if it were illegal. So he'd be kicked out of the clave. But then she goes on to say that there's no rule. People just frown upon it. So if it's not a rule and people frown upon it, why would he be kicked out of the clave? I mean, it's not illegal, and it's not something the clave enforces, like, officially as a rule. So why would she say he'd be kicked out of the clave, but then say, oh, people just frown upon it? It just seems like a little bit of a contradiction in what she's saying, and I'm just not sure, like, because obviously, having read the books, it's not illegal, and it's not something you get kicked out of the clave for. So it's just interesting that she says it if it's not really something that would happen. Like, maybe she was being, like, overly dramatic and then, like, kind of take a step back to say the truth. But I don't know. It's just like Izzy can't make up her mind about what she really means or what she really wants to say here, and it's just kind of a little bit hard to understand what she means for someone who hasn't read the books, because she's saying 2 different things. So let's move on to chapter 12, which is Dead Man's Party. And we're going to move on to page 216. So Claire is being sarcastic again, because like I said a lot, her humor is pretty sarcastic. And it's one of the things I love about her. So she says, so first her response, she's responding to Jace, right? So Jace says, last time I left you alone, a demon attacked you, he pointed out. Well, I'd certainly hate to interrupt your pleasant night stroll with my sudden death. He blinked. There is a fine line between sarcasm and outright hostility, and you seem to have crossed it. So I don't think this is crossing the line. I think at later points in the story in other books, she does cross that line, and Jace does as well. Like the point where sarcasm is no longer sarcasm, you're just being mean, or trying to stir the pot, or just cause trouble. So I don't think that's what she's doing here. He's kind of being like, giving her a hard time, being like, can't leave you alone, you're gonna get attacked by a demon. And she's like, oh, well, sorry, like, if that's such a hassle for you. And he's like, well, now you're just being mean. And it's like, she's not. You're poking at her and she's responding to it. I don't think she's crossed the line. And I think, I'm not sure why Jace thinks she is. Like, this, I feel like this is pretty tame in the sarcasm department, and I should know, because I'm like the master of sarcastic humor and sarcasm in general. Just ask my mother. Page 219. So here we have Magnus telling the Shadowhunters that they can't have weapons and stuff like that in this party. And so Jace has pulled out his stele, which, as we know, is what creates runes that Shadowhunters use on themselves to give them special, like, abilities and things. So he has it out, and Magnus does this. He plucked the stele out of Jace's hand. Clary hadn't even realized he was holding it and held it up. Jace looked faintly abashed. As for this, Magnus said, sliding it into Jace's pocket, keep it in your pants, Shadowhunter. So, what does Magnus expect him to do with that stele? He's not going to be able to kill with it. So, he's not going to be able to attack he's not going to be able to attack the Downworlders with it unless he's using it on himself and then attacking the Downworlders physically. So I don't understand why it's such a big deal that he not have his stele out. And I think it's just a way for Magnus to put that line in there, kind of like, you can keep this in your pants. He's always making the like sexual innuendo kind of comments and like saying one thing, possibly meaning another thing. That's just how Magnus is. He likes to make everything into a joke and like that kind of joke. We'll see that more as we go along. He's, no, it's hard to really describe Magnus. He's very flamboyant and like over the top. And I think this is kind of part of that and what he's saying. I just don't get why he'd be upset having the stele out in particular. So let's go to the next page to 220. So this is a part of one of the reasons I wasn't a huge fan of Izzy in the first book. So in this scene, we have Clary talking to Simon, the two of them having been friends practically all their lives, or having like an inside kind of joke conversation kind of thing. And so Clary laughed out loud. Immediately, Isabel was beside her, breathing down her neck. Am I missing something funny, Simon? Simon had the grace to look embarrassed, but said nothing. Clary muttered, you're not missing anything, and dropped behind them. So here's Simon and Clary having kind of like an inside joke, a private moment, and Isabel's just like, well, you're not paying attention to me. Me. You gotta pay attention to me. And just kind of like butts in. It's like, is something funny? You can go away now. I'm talking to Simon. You can go away now. I don't know. It's just, it seemed kind of rude and a little much. Like, I don't know. I just don't understand why Isabel kind of has this attitude towards Clary. If you have a theory as to what you think, please let me know, because it's always been confusing for me to understand why she acted like this, especially when the two of them become so close later on in the books. So let me know. I'd love to hear what you think. Let's move on though. Page 224. So in this one we see, I'm talking about Magnus's warlock mark. So every warlock has some distinguishing feature. Magnus's have always been, you know, his cat eyes. He has eyes like a cat. However, we see here that this isn't completely true. So he shut the door behind him and leaned against it. When he crossed his arms, his t-shirt rode up, showing a strip of flat golden stomach, unmarked by a navel. So he's got another warlock mark, which happens to be no belly button. I mean, this isn't a huge deal. I just think it's interesting that no one ever talks about this particular warlock mark. Everyone's so focused on his cat eyes, which are like really cool. And I think the main feature, because they're like right there in front of you. But as far as I'm aware, we don't really hear about this ever again. The fact that he has no belly button. And it's like, I don't know, I find it interesting, especially when we get later on in the series. And we have him in it more. I don't want to say much more, ruin anything if you're only on this book. So let's move on to the last one. It's on the same page, so we're still on page 224. So let me just read. Magnus turned his inhuman eyes on her. You are not one of them, he said, not of the clave, but you can see the invisible world. I mean, so he's telling her you're not a shadow hunter, you're not a part of the clave, you're not one of them, but she is one of them. And I mean, he knows it, right? Because he knows her mother. But she knows she's a shadow hunter. Everybody in the room knows she's a shadow hunter. So it's just interesting that he specifically says, well, you're not one of them. But she is one of them. She has a rune to prove it. She wouldn't be able to bear that mark if she wasn't one of them. So I just find it interesting that he says that if maybe he's just trying to show that he doesn't know as much as they think he knows, and he's just kind of saying it so they'll be like, oh, maybe he doesn't really know anything, but he does know something. I mean, he does know more, but in this instance, it's like, why say that when everybody knows she's a shadow hunter? Like, she really is. She can prove it, but I don't know. I just find that interesting. So that's it for this video, and we move on to chapter 13 and more next time. So thank you for coming back. I'd love to hear what you have to say about these 2 chapters or previous chapters. Go ahead and leave comments down below, and I'll respond and we can talk about it. Thanks so much for tuning in and hearing what I have to say, and I'll see you next time.